The night was quiet until Sarah's scream cut through the air, raw and desperate, shaking the walls of the small apartment. She clutched Emma tightly, her arms trembling as she held the little girl against her chest. Daniel's face twisted with anger, his jaw clenched, his eyes cold as he turned toward the door. Sarah pleaded, "Don't walk out, not like this," her voice breaking under the weight of panic. Daniel muttered, "I can't do this anymore," before slamming the door with such force that the picture frames rattled. The sound echoed in Sarah's chest, louder than the sirens wailing faintly in the distance. Emma whispered, "Mommy, what's happening?" But Sarah could only press her lips to her daughter's hair, trying to quiet the storm inside her. Every second stretched into eternity, the silence heavier than the sound of the door closing. In that moment, Sarah's world fractured, and she knew nothing would ever be the same again. She breathed hard, staring at the empty space where Daniel once stood, the weight of betrayal sinking in like a stone. Sarah sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the door as if Daniel's shadow still lingered. Emma's small hand tugged at her sleeve, grounding her to the present. Sarah whispered, "I promise you're safe," though the words felt fragile, almost broken. Her heart thudded as she tried to calm the storm within, masking her fear with a shaky smile. The sirens outside faded, leaving only the sound of Emma's shallow breaths. Sarah reached for a blanket, wrapping it around her child, whispering, "You're my world, Emma." She closed her eyes briefly, fighting to push away the weight of betrayal. For years she had carried her daughter alone, but this moment reminded her of every lonely night, every sacrifice, every unspoken fear. The silence pressed harder, reminding her that safety was fragile, and love was the only anchor she had left. Sarah's thoughts drifted to the past, replaying every warning sign she had ignored. Daniel's late nights, his cold silences, the way he avoided Emma's gaze. She whispered, "I should have seen it," her voice trembling with regret. Emma rested her head on her lap, unaware of the weight crushing her mother. Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, finding brief comfort in the softness. The silence of the room grew louder, pressing against her chest. She remembered promises Daniel once made, dreams they once shared, and how easily they had shattered tonight. Emma mumbled in half-sleep, "I love you, Mommy." Sarah's tears welled again, but she forced a smile, whispering back, "I love you more." That simple truth kept her tethered. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking each passing second like a reminder of her isolation. Sarah's gaze lingered on the family photo, now tilted, showing what once was. She muttered, "We were supposed to be forever." Her voice cracked, and the bitterness of broken vows settled in her chest. Emma stirred in her arms, and Sarah quickly masked the pain with a soft lullaby. Her voice wavered, yet it carried a fragile strength, wrapping around Emma like a shield. "Hush now," she whispered, rocking gently. The night felt endless, the silence heavy, but she knew she could not let despair consume her. She drew a deep breath, realizing that every moment mattered, and Emma needed her whole, even when she felt shattered. The storm outside began to fade, replaced by eerie calm. Sarah closed her eyes and whispered, "Well, be okay," though her voice quivered under doubt. Emma shifted in her sleep, her small hand tightening around Sarah's finger. Sarah felt a fragile warmth blossom inside her, a reminder of what she was fighting for. The betrayal cut deep, but the love she felt for Emma was stronger than any wound. She pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead, drawing courage from her child's innocence. The apartment felt hollow, yet in this moment, it became a fortress built on her will to survive. Sarah's chest rose with determination, her whispers now steadier, "No matter what happens, I'll protect you." It was a vow, fragile, yet unbreakable. Morning light crept through the blinds, sharp and cold, illuminating the exhaustion carved into Sarah's face. She rose from the couch, muscles stiff from a sleepless night, Emma still curled beneath a blanket. The silence of the apartment pressed in, broken only by the faint hum of traffic outside. Sarah whispered, "One step at a time," though her voice shook under the weight of uncertainty. She forced herself into motion, gathering Emma's school things with trembling hands, determined to keep their routine intact. Emma stirred, blinking awake, her eyes wide with quiet confusion. "Mommy, are you okay?" she asked softly, her words piercing deeper than Sarah could admit. Sarah smiled faintly, masking the ache inside, and said, "We're okay, sweetheart. We'll always be okay." The lie felt heavy, but it was the only shield she had. Her world was fragile, yet she stood tall for her daughter, knowing love demanded she carry the weight. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee, though Sarah barely tasted the bitter sip she forced down. Bills cluttered the counter, their presence louder than any words Daniel had left behind. Emma sat at the table, swinging her legs, eating cereal quietly, her innocence contrasting the tension in the room. Sarah flipped through envelopes, her chest tightening as numbers blurred together. She muttered, "We'll manage," though the words cracked against the silence. Emma looked up. "What if Daddy doesn't come back?" Sarah's throat constricted, but she forced a steady tone. "Then we'll still be strong." The lies she told her child felt like fragile threads holding them together. Her hands shook as she stacked the bills aside, knowing survival meant facing a storm she was unprepared for. Love was her anchor, but fear gnawed at its edges. The walk to school felt endless, each step heavy against the weight Sarah carried. The air was crisp, autumn leaves crunching underfoot, but her thoughts were louder than the city sounds. Emma held her hand, skipping occasionally, her small smile a fragile shield against uncertainty. "Mommy, can I stay after class for art club?" Emma asked, hope lighting her eyes. Sarah hesitated, thinking of money, of time, of the fragile balance already crumbling. She forced a smile. "We'll see, sweetheart." The words tasted bitter, because she wanted to give her child everything, but had so little left to give. Emma squeezed her hand tighter, oblivious to the storm inside Sarah's chest. For the world, Sarah wore a mask of calm, but each heartbeat reminded her that she was standing on breaking ground. Sarah lingered outside the school gates after Emma ran inside, her daughter's laughter fading into the crowd. For a moment, she stood frozen, clutching her coat tight against the chill. The other parents chatted easily, their smiles effortless, their lives unbroken. Sarah lowered her gaze, feeling the sting of comparison, the invisible walls separating her from them. Her phone buzzed, a reminder of overdue rent, a message she couldn't ignore. Her hands trembled as she slid it back into her pocket, whispering to herself, "Not now, not here." She drew a breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked away, her steps heavy with determination. Though her heart ached, she refused to let Emma see the cracks. Every sacrifice was a brick in the fragile fortress she was building for her child. Back at the apartment, silence swallowed Sarah as she stood by the window, staring at the city below. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, her breath fogging the pain. The emptiness inside the home was louder than any noise outside. She whispered, "You have to be strong," though her reflection showed the truth of her weariness. Memories of Daniel's anger replayed, each one cutting deeper, but she shoved them down, refusing to collapse. On the counter, the bills waited like predators, reminding her that survival would demand more than resolve. She turned away from the window, shoulders squared, eyes red but fierce. The world could break her, but not while Emma needed her whole. Tonight, she would hold her daughter close and believe, if only for a moment, that they would find a way through. The apartment felt colder that evening, shadows crawling across the walls as Sarah sat at the table surrounded by unopened bills. Each envelope felt heavier than paper, carrying the weight of her fragile stability. She whispered, "I can't let this destroy us," her voice breaking in the stillness. Emma sat nearby, coloring quietly, unaware of the storm building around her mother. Sarah's phone buzzed, and her stomach dropped at the message flashing across the screen. Daniel wanted custody. The words burned into her chest, stealing her breath. She pressed her hands over her face, fighting back tears, refusing to collapse in front of Emma. The world wasn't just pressing against her anymore, it was trying to rip everything from her hands. She looked at her daughter and forced herself to stand. "I'll protect you," she whispered again, a vow sharpened by fear. Later that night, Sarah called her best friend, Rachel, hoping for comfort. Rachel's voice was hesitant, the pauses sharper than any words spoken. "I didn't know how to tell you," Rachel finally admitted, revealing she had known Daniel's intentions long before. Sarah's chest tightened, betrayal cutting from another angle. "You knew, and you didn't warn me?" she asked, her tone trembling with both hurt and fury. Rachel stammered excuses, but Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her. Trust, the one lifeline she thought she had left, began to fracture. Her hand gripped the phone so tightly, her knuckles whitened, her eyes brimming with tears she refused to shed. The silence between them was louder than the words exchanged, cementing the truth that Sarah was more alone than she ever believed. The next day at work, Sarah sat at her desk in the small office, trying to focus as her supervisor's voice pierced the air. "You've been distracted, Sarah," he said sharply, holding reports she had left incomplete. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but the weight pressing on her shoulders left no room for apology. She mumbled, "I'll fix it," while her fingers fumbled with the paperwork. The whispers of co-workers drifted around her, their glances cutting deeper than words. Every corner of her life seemed to crumble at once, the walls closing in. Her job, once her only steady anchor, now felt like another battlefield. She forced her hands steady and lifted her chin, determined not to fall apart under their watchful eyes. Survival demanded she keep moving, even as her strength thinned like thread. That evening, Sarah walked Emma home from school, her daughter's cheerful chatter a fragile light against the heaviness pressing down. Emma held up a drawing proudly, a colorful sketch of a family. Sarah's chest ached at the sight, the missing piece in the picture more painful than any words. "It's beautiful," Sarah said, forcing a smile, though her eyes stung with tears. Emma beamed, unaware of the storm surrounding her small world. Sarah squeezed her hand tighter, silently vowing to protect the joy still glowing in her child's heart. The world was unraveling, but she could not let Emma feel its sharp edges. For her daughter, she would build walls out of love, no matter how broken she was inside. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Sarah sat by the window staring out at the city lights. The streets below buzzed with life, but she felt trapped in a cage of silence. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, worn and haunted by battles she never asked for. "How much more can I take?" she whispered to herself, her voice carried away by the hum of the night. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Daniel, cruel words meant to break her resolve. She gripped the device and whispered, "You won't win." Her resolve burned faintly, fragile but alive. Beyond the darkness she searched for strength, knowing tomorrow would bring another fight. She pressed her hand against the glass, steadying herself, and whispered one final vow, "Emma will never see me break." Sarah sat in the lawyer's office, the air heavy with the scent of paper and ink. "Your ex is filing aggressively," the lawyer said, sliding documents toward her. The words pierced like knives, her stomach sinking with dread. She gripped the papers, the legal language blurring as her heart raced. "How can he twist everything this way?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The lawyer leaned forward, voice firm. "Hell fight dirty, but if you stay strong you can win." Sarah nodded, though her hands shook uncontrollably. Betrayal wasn't just in the past anymore. It was here, clawing at her present. Her chest burned as fear threatened to crush her resolve. Yet in the silence that followed, her daughter's face came to mind, the only anchor keeping her from shattering. That evening, Sarah sat on the floor of her apartment surrounded by piles of documents. Every line of text felt like a blade, cutting into her fragile hope. Emma peeked from the bedroom, holding her stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide with worry. "Mommy, are you okay?" Sarah forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart, go back to bed." Emma nodded but lingered, reluctant to leave. Sarah turned back to the papers, her tears blurring the ink as her chest tightened. The silence pressed against her ears, louder than any scream. She wanted to collapse, but she couldn't, not when her daughter was watching. Instead, she straightened her back, whispering, "You're stronger than this." The words barely convinced herself, but they were all she had left. Sarah's supervisor cornered her at work the next day. "We need someone fully committed," he said bluntly, holding a folder of her late submissions. Panic surged as she stammered, "I'll do better, I promise." He sighed, shaking his head, You can't keep falling behind. Whispers drifted across the office, her coworkers' eyes burning into her back. Shame tightened around her chest like chains. She thought of Emma, of the bills stacked on the counter, of the custody fight waiting at home. Every part of her life was collapsing, piece by piece. As the supervisor walked away, Sarah clenched her jaw, her fists hidden behind the desk. She whispered to herself, "You can't break, not now." Yet inside, she felt the cracks widening. That night, Sarah stood in the bathroom staring at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked older, broken, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. She touched the glass as if trying to reach someone she had lost. Her breath fogged the surface, blurring the image of the stranger staring back. "Who are you now?" she whispered. Memories of Daniel's betrayal flashed, each sharper than the last. The weight of her failures pressed against her chest, yet she clenched her fists at her sides. "You can't lose her," she said, voice trembling but resolute. The silence carried her words, echoing in the small room. She didn't recognize herself, but she knew one truth: she would endure for Emma, no matter the cost. The apartment was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock. Sarah sat on the couch holding Emma's drawing, a bright picture of a smiling family. Her eyes stung as she traced the missing figure with her fingertip. Emma stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly, and Sarah whispered, "I'll never let anyone take you." Her heart ached, but her vow grew sharper, fueled by pain. Betrayal had stripped her of trust, work had stolen her strength, but love was still hers to wield. She pressed the drawing to her chest, eyes closed, breathing deeply. Tomorrow would bring another fight, another storm, but tonight she let herself believe in love's fragile promise. For Emma, she would rise again. The phone rang unexpectedly the next day, a voice from the past breaking through the static. "Sarah, it's your brother," the man said, his tone uncertain yet firm. She froze, her chest tightening at the name she hadn't spoken in years. Memories of their fractured childhood resurfaced, raw and jagged. "Why now?" she asked, her voice sharp, defensive. He hesitated, then said, "Because I know what you're going through, and I can help." Sarah's heart raced, torn between anger and longing. She whispered, "I don't need saving," yet her voice betrayed doubt. Silence stretched before he said, "You don't have to fight this alone." Her hand trembled as she ended the call, the weight of the past crashing against the fragile present. Sarah paced the living room, her thoughts spiraling as memories of her brother flooded back. Childhood nights of whispered promises, then years of silence and betrayal. She pressed her palms against her temples, whispering, "Why now?" Emma peeked from the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Who was that, Mommy?" she asked, her innocence cutting deeper than any blade. Sarah knelt, pulling her close, forcing a smile. "Just someone from the past," she said softly. Inside, fear battled hope, the possibility of family clashing with the scars he left behind. Could she let him in, or would he destroy what little strength she had left? A knock at the door startled Sarah that evening. Her heart pounded as she opened it to reveal Michael, her older brother, face lined with years she had missed. "It's been too long," he said quietly, his voice carrying both regret and longing. Sarah's jaw clenched, her hands tightening on the doorframe. "You left me," she whispered, anger laced with sorrow. He lowered his eyes, ashamed. "I know, and I can't erase that. But I can stand with you now." Sarah's chest ached, her mind torn between pushing him away and letting him in. Emma's small voice broke the silence. "Who's this, Mommy?" Sarah swallowed hard, knowing the past had already stepped into their fragile present. They sat at the kitchen table, silence stretching like a wound. Michael stared at his hands, then said, "I've been watching from a distance. I couldn't step in until now." Sarah's voice trembled with fury. "You don't get to choose when I'm worth saving." His eyes filled with guilt, yet determination lingered beneath. "I can help you fight him," he said. Sarah shook her head, torn between longing for support and fear of betrayal. Emma entered, sensing the tension, her small presence a fragile reminder of what mattered most. Sarah looked at her brother, her eyes narrowing. "If you stay for her," she said firmly. The words hung heavy, demanding truth. Later that night, Sarah stood by Emma's bed, watching her daughter sleep peacefully, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Michael's words echoed in her head, stirring wounds she had buried for years. She brushed Emma's hair back, whispering, "You're my reason, my strength." The fear of trusting her brother again gnawed at her chest, but a small spark of hope flickered beneath. Could he truly help, or would he abandon her once more? She pressed a kiss to Emma's forehead, a vow unspoken. Whatever came next, she would fight. Behind her, Michael stood quietly in the doorway, his expression unreadable, carrying the weight of both past regret and present promise. The courtroom buzzed with hushed voices as Sarah sat at the table, her hands clasped tightly together. Across from her, Daniel smirked, his lawyer whispering strategies. Fear clawed at her chest, but she kept her eyes fixed on the judge. "You have to stay calm," Michael whispered beside her, his presence steadying her nerves. Sarah inhaled sharply, feeling Emma's future hanging in the balance. When the judge entered, the room fell silent, the weight of every choice pressing down. Her pulse quickened, but she reminded herself, "This isn't just about me, it's about her." Daniel's confidence fueled her fury, but she buried it beneath composure. As the proceedings began, Sarah straightened her back and prepared for the battle that would decide everything. Daniel's lawyer rose, painting Sarah as unstable, a mother unfit to raise her child. Each word felt like poison seeping into the room, twisting truths into daggers. Sarah's fists clenched beneath the table, her jaw trembling, but she remained silent. Her lawyer rose in defense, listing every sacrifice Sarah had made, every job she'd worked, every night she'd held her child through storms of fear. Sarah blinked back tears, determined not to crumble. Emma's face filled her thoughts, steadying her resolve. Daniel shifted in his seat, smirking, certain of his victory. But Sarah knew her truth, and when her lawyer looked at her, she nodded faintly. It was time to fight not with fear, but with her story. When Sarah was called to testify, the room felt unbearably heavy. She rose slowly, her hands trembling, but her voice steadied as she spoke. She told the judge of nights alone with Emma, of working double shifts, of promises she had kept despite betrayal. Tears welled, but she did not hide them. "I have made mistakes," she admitted, "but I've never failed my child." Every word carried both pain and truth, echoing through the silence. Daniel shifted, uncomfortable, his mask of control cracking. Sarah's heart pounded, but she kept her eyes on the judge, refusing to let fear silence her. Her truth was no weapon, but it was armor strong enough to endure. Daniel rose next, his words venomous, painting Sarah as manipulative. He spoke of her struggles as proof of weakness, twisting every sacrifice into failure. Sarah's chest ached, but she did not look away. Michael's hand rested firmly on her shoulder, a silent reminder that she was not alone. Daniel's anger spilled out, his voice rising, and for the first time the judge's eyes narrowed with disapproval. His polished mask slipped, exposing the bitterness beneath. Sarah's lawyer leaned close, whispering, "He's unraveling." Sarah exhaled shakily, feeling the tide shift ever so slightly. For the first time, she believed victory was possible. The final moments of the hearing stretched into eternity. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, whispering to herself, "For Emma." When the judge finally spoke, the room fell into silence. Custody is awarded to the mother, his voice steady and final. Relief crashed through Sarah like a wave, her breath breaking as tears filled her eyes. Daniel's face twisted in fury, his fists clenching against the table. Michael leaned close, whispering, "You did it." Sarah turned toward Emma, who sat quietly in the back with a guardian, her small smile radiant with hope. Sarah's heart broke and healed in the same breath. She had won, but she knew the cost was written in scars that would never fully fade. That evening, Sarah returned home with Emma. The apartment, though still small and cluttered, felt like a fortress rebuilt. Emma leapt into her mother's arms, whispering, "We did it, Mommy." Sarah hugged her tightly, her tears falling into her daughter's hair. The silence that once haunted their home now felt like peace. "Yes, we did," Sarah whispered back, her voice breaking with relief. Yet behind the joy lingered exhaustion, the scars of the fight still raw. But for the first time, Sarah allowed herself to believe they were safe. She tucked Emma in, watching her drift into sleep with a smile. Tonight was not about battles, it was about love that had endured. Later that night, Sarah sat on the couch with Michael, the silence heavy but less hostile. "Thank you," she said softly, words difficult but sincere. Michael nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I should have been there sooner," he admitted. Sarah sighed, staring at the window. "Maybe this is the beginning of something new," she said, unsure but hopeful. For years, she had carried the weight alone, and now, maybe, she didn't have to anymore. The air between them carried both tension and promise, unspoken wounds still raw, but bridges quietly forming. Sarah's chest eased, knowing family, even broken, could still hold strength. Sarah stood in front of the mirror the next morning, her reflection tired but transformed. The woman who once looked broken now bore quiet strength. She touched her cheek, whispering, "You're still here." Her scars remained, but they no longer defined her. Emma ran into the room, hair messy, laughter spilling freely. Sarah scooped her up, spinning her gently, her heart light for the first time in years. The future was uncertain, but today she chose hope. For herself, for Emma, for the life they were building together. The fight had left its mark, but it had also carved strength into her soul. That evening, Sarah and Emma sat at the kitchen table, drawing together. Emma's crayon spread across the surface, her small hands creating bright colors. "Look, Mommy, it's us," she said, showing a picture of two figures holding hands beneath a shining sun. Sarah's heart swelled, her eyes glistening. "It's perfect," she whispered, kissing her daughter's cheek. The drawing was simple, but it held everything that mattered. No court could take away the love they shared, no betrayal could destroy it. In that moment, Sarah realized that true victory wasn't custody. It was this quiet peace, built on love's resilience. The night was quiet, the city outside hushed under starlight. Sarah stood by Emma's bedroom door, her hand resting gently against the frame. Inside, Emma slept soundly, her small breaths steady. Sarah whispered, "We're stronger now, and we'll never stop fighting." She smiled for the first time without force, the mask of survival finally lifting. She turned toward the window, staring at the dark horizon with hope in her eyes. The future was unknown, but tonight she was no longer afraid. Her past no longer held her prisoner. She was free to build something new, with her daughter by her side.